The gym fell silent. Every eye in the room fixed on the small woman in the oversized gray hoodie, standing barefoot on the mat. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Across from her, a 6'2" man cracked his neck, his black belt wrapped tightly around his waist, like a badge of absolute authority. "Come on," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'll go easy on you. It'll be fun." What happened next would be talked about in that company for years to come. But to understand why this moment mattered so much, we need to go back to a time before anyone knew the truth, before the masks came off, before the powerful learned what it truly means to underestimate someone. This is a story about arrogance, about pain, about secrets hidden in plain sight, and about one woman who had been fighting battles her whole life, battles that no one ever saw. Her name was Elena Reyes. And by the end of this day, she would remind everyone in that room why you should never, ever judge a book by its cover. Elena Reyes didn't look like a CEO. That was the first thing people always noticed, or rather didn't notice, about her. At 34 years old, she stood barely 5'3", with kind brown eyes that seemed too soft for the corporate world. She wore minimal makeup, kept her dark hair in a simple ponytail, and preferred comfortable flats over designer heels. When she walked through the halls of Horizon Technologies, the billion-dollar software company she had built from nothing, most people assumed she was an assistant or an intern, or, on particularly bad days, someone from the cleaning staff. She never corrected them. There was a reason for that, a reason that went back 20 years, to a childhood that had taught her the most important lesson of her life. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. Elena had grown up in a small apartment in the roughest part of the city. Her mother worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. Her father had left when Elena was 4, leaving behind nothing but broken promises and a mountain of debt. Money was always tight. Safety was never guaranteed. The neighborhood they lived in was controlled by people who took what they wanted and hurt anyone who stood in their way. When Elena was 8 years old, she watched 3 older boys corner her mother outside their building. They wanted her purse. Her mother, exhausted from a 12-hour shift, had tried to reason with them. One of the boys pushed her to the ground. Elena had run at them screaming, fists swinging wildly. She was tiny. She was terrified. And she had absolutely no idea what she was doing. One of the boys laughed and shoved her aside like she was nothing. She hit the concrete hard, scraping her palms and knees. Her mother screamed. Someone from a nearby window finally shouted, and the boys ran off with the purse. That night, as her mother cleaned Elena's wounds with shaking hands, Elena made a promise to herself. She would never be helpless again. She would never watch someone she loved get hurt while she stood by, powerless. The next week, she found a community center 3 bus rides away that offered free martial arts classes to kids from low-income families. The instructor was a retired military veteran named Master William Chen. He was 72 years old, walked with a slight limp, and had hands that could break boards like they were made of paper. He looked at 8-year-old Elena, bruised, angry, and barely tall enough to reach his chest, and he saw something. "Why do you want to learn?" he asked her. "Because I never want to feel weak again," she answered. Master Chen nodded slowly. "Weakness isn't about size or strength. It's about spirit. I can teach you techniques, but the fire that has to come from within." He paused, studying her face. "Do you have fire, little one?" Elena thought about her mother crying in the kitchen when she thought Elena was asleep. She thought about the boys who had laughed while pushing them around. She thought about all the times she had felt small and invisible and afraid. "Yes," she said, "I have fire." And so it began. For the next 15 years, martial arts became Elena's entire world. Every morning before school, she trained. Every evening after homework, she trained. While other kids played video games or went to parties, Elena was in that community center, pushing her body beyond what she thought was possible. Master Chen taught her everything: judo, taekwondo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, boxing. He taught her how to use her small size as an advantage, how to be faster, more precise, more strategic than larger opponents. By the time she was 12, she had won her first local competition. By 14, she was competing at the state level. By 17, she had earned her black belt and was ranked among the top junior fighters in the country. But Master Chen taught her something else too, something that would shape her entire philosophy of life. The greatest martial artists, he told her one evening after a particularly brutal training session, are the ones who never have to fight. True mastery isn't about proving your strength. It's about knowing your strength so deeply that you don't need anyone else to validate it. He handed her a glass of water and sat down across from her. The loud ones, the ones who brag and show off, they're not strong, they're scared. They need everyone to see their power because they're not sure they have any. Elena frowned. But what about competition? What about winning? Competition is a tool for sharpening yourself, Master Chen said. Winning is a result of proper training, but neither of those things defines who you are. You will meet people in your life who are obsessed with dominance, with making others feel small so they can feel big. Those people are empty inside. Don't become one of them. He leaned forward, his old eyes serious. And when you meet those people, remember, the best victory is the one they never see coming. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're weak. And then, if they force your hand, show them what true strength looks like. Elena carried those words with her through everything that came next. When Elena was 19, tragedy struck. Her mother, worn down by decades of hard work and harder circumstances, was diagnosed with a serious illness. The treatment was expensive, far more expensive than anything they could afford. Elena dropped out of competitive martial arts to work full-time. She took any job she could find, waitressing, cleaning offices, tutoring kids in math. Every penny went toward her mother's care. It wasn't enough. One night, at her lowest point, Elena sat in a hospital waiting room with $17 in her bank account and absolutely no idea how she was going to pay the next round of medical bills. That's when she had an idea. During her years of training, Elena had noticed something. The martial arts gyms she visited always had clunky, outdated systems for scheduling classes, tracking membership, and managing payments. She had mentioned it to Master Chen once, and he had shrugged. "We're fighters, not tech people," he said. But Elena was good with computers. She had taught herself programming in high school, staying up late at night to learn coding from free online tutorials. It was a skill she had never really used for anything serious, until now. In between hospital visits and part-time jobs, Elena started building software. Simple at first, just a basic scheduling system for martial arts studios. She emailed it to a few gym owners she knew from her competition days, offering it for free in exchange for feedback. They loved it. Word spread. More gyms wanted the software. Elena added features. She started charging a small fee, then a larger fee. Within a year, she had enough clients that she could quit her other jobs. Within 3 years, her software had expanded beyond martial arts into fitness centers, yoga studios, and sports clubs across the country. Within 5 years, Horizon Technologies was a multi-million-dollar company. And through all of it, every business meeting, every investor pitch, every media interview, Elena never lost sight of who she was. The little girl who had learned to fight because she never wanted to feel powerless again. Her mother's treatment was paid for. Her mother recovered. And Elena kept building, but she also kept training. 3 times a week, without fail, she went to a small, unmarked gym on the outskirts of the city where no one knew she was a CEO, where she was just Elena, the quiet woman in the corner who hit the heavy bag like she was exorcising demons. She never told anyone at her company about her martial arts background. She never displayed her trophies or her black belt certifications. When people asked about her hobbies, she mentioned reading and hiking. Why? Because she remembered what Master Chen had taught her. Real strength doesn't need to announce itself, and because in the corporate world, being underestimated had turned out to be her greatest weapon. Or let's talk about Victor Kane. Victor was 38 years old, 6'2", and absolutely convinced that he was the most impressive person in any room he entered. He had the kind of aggressive confidence that some people mistook for charisma. Loud voice, firm handshake, intense eye contact that lasted just a little too long. He had recently been hired as the new head of corporate development at Horizon Technologies. His job was to oversee acquisitions and partnerships to help the company expand its reach and influence. On paper, he was highly qualified. MBA from a prestigious school, 10 years of experience at top consulting firms, a track record of successful deals. What the paper didn't show was his personality. Victor was the kind of man who measured his worth by how much he could dominate others. In meetings, he talked over people. In negotiations, he used intimidation tactics. He name-dropped constantly, bragged about his connections, and made sure everyone knew about his various achievements. He was also, as he made sure to mention at every possible opportunity, a 4th-degree black belt in Taekwondo. "I've been training since I was 12, he would say, casually flexing his shoulders. It's not just about fitness. It's about discipline, mental toughness. Most people couldn't handle it. He talked about his martial arts background the way some people talk about expensive cars or exclusive vacations, as proof of his superiority. In his first month at Horizon, Victor had managed to alienate nearly half the staff. He criticized employees publicly, took credit for other people's ideas, and seemed incapable of speaking to anyone without somehow making it about himself. But he brought in results, at least in terms of numbers, so leadership tolerated him. The employees, however, did not. "He called me sweetheart in front of the whole team," one woman confided to a colleague. "He told me my presentation was adorable," another said. Then he took the idea straight to the board and presented it as his own. "I tried to give him feedback on a contract, and he literally laughed at me, said I was too emotional to understand business." The complaints piled up. HR had multiple files, but Victor was careful, always staying just barely inside the lines, always having plausible deniability. And he had a protector. Thomas Webb, the chief operating officer, had been the one to bring Victor in. They had worked together before, years ago, and Thomas was convinced that Victor was exactly what the company needed. "He's aggressive, sure," Thomas told concerned colleagues, "but that's what makes him effective. We need killers in this business." And so Victor stayed, unchallenged, untouchable, until the day he met Elena. Here's the thing about Elena. She made a point of staying invisible within her own company. She didn't give speeches at all-hands meetings. She didn't walk around the office shaking hands and making small talk. She spent most of her time in a modest office on the 3rd floor, not the executive suite on the 20th, working on product development and strategy. When she needed to observe how things were going, she did it quietly. She would walk through different departments, usually in casual clothes, sometimes carrying a laptop bag or a coffee cup. People assumed she was someone's assistant or a contractor or a new hire who hadn't gotten her badge yet. She listened to conversations. She watched how managers treated their teams. She noticed things that executives in corner offices never saw. It was, in many ways, her greatest intelligence-gathering technique. People said things around the quiet girl in the hoodie that they would never say in front of the CEO. On the day everything changed, Elena was doing exactly that, wandering through the building, observing, thinking. The company had recently installed a small fitness center on one of the lower floors. It was part of Elena's initiative to support employee well-being, free gym access, yoga classes, meditation rooms. She had never actually visited it herself, but she wanted to see how it was being used. She took the elevator down, slipped through the glass doors, and found herself in a modern, well-equipped gym. A few employees were on treadmills or lifting weights. In the far corner, there was a matted area set up for what appeared to be some kind of martial arts class, and that's where she saw Victor Kane. He was standing in the center of the mat, wearing a pristine white dobok with his black belt prominently displayed. Around him were about a dozen employees, a mix of people who had apparently signed up for his Leadership Through Martial Arts workshop. Elena felt her stomach tighten. She had heard about this workshop. Victor had pitched it to HR as a team-building exercise, a way to teach discipline and mental fortitude through martial arts training. What she was seeing now looked more like an ego trip. Victor was demonstrating kicks and punches to the group, his movements competent but showy. More importantly, he was talking, constantly. See how I generate power from the hip? That's years of training right there. Most people don't have the dedication to develop this kind of control. He threw a spinning kick at a practice pad held by a nervous-looking young man. The thing about martial arts, Victor continued, is that it separates the strong from the weak. In business, same thing. You either dominate or you get dominated. Liu. Elena moved to the edge of the room, finding a spot near the water cooler where she could observe without being noticed. She crossed her arms and watched. The employees in the group looked uncomfortable. Some were trying to follow along with the basic moves Victor was teaching. Others were clearly just waiting for it to be over. One woman, Elena recognized her as Maya, a talented software engineer, was struggling with a particular stance. Her feet were positioned incorrectly, and she kept losing her balance. "No, no, no," Victor said, walking over to her. His tone was the kind of patient-sounding condescension that made Elena's skin crawl. "Like this. Watch." He demonstrated the stance again, then gestured for Maya to try. Maya tried. She wobbled. Victor laughed. Not a kind laugh. "It's okay," he said. Loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some people just aren't built for this. Maybe stick to coding, right?" A few people chuckled nervously. Maya's face flushed red. She stepped back from the mat, arms wrapped around herself. Elena felt anger building in her chest. She remembered what it was like to be that person, the one being mocked, the one made to feel small. She remembered the boys who had pushed her mother to the ground, but she also remembered Master Chen's teaching. Don't react. Observe. Choose your moment. She stayed where she was. The workshop continued for another 20 minutes. Victor demonstrated more techniques, offered more backhanded compliments, and generally used every possible opportunity to remind everyone how skilled and accomplished he was. Finally, he clapped his hands together. "Okay, let's do something fun. Anyone want to spar with me? Light contact, nothing serious, just a chance to practice what you've learned." The employees looked at each other. No one moved. "Come on," Victor said, spreading his arms. "I promise I'll go easy." Still nothing. "What? Nobody's brave enough? This is what I'm talking about. You have to be willing to take risks. That's how you grow." He scanned the room, looking for a target. His eyes passed over the employees on the mat, then drifted to the edges of the room. They landed on Elena. She was still standing by the water cooler, a paper cup in her hand, watching quietly. In her oversized gray hoodie and faded jeans, she looked like she had wandered in from the street. Her posture was relaxed, unthreatening. Victor smiled. "Hey, you," he called out. "I don't think we've met. You interested in trying?" Elena looked up, as if surprised to be addressed. "Me?" "Yeah, you. What's your name?" "Elena." "Elena? Nice." Victor gestured toward the mat. "Come on over. You look like you could use some exercise." A few employees exchanged uncomfortable glances. They knew who Elena was. They knew this was about to be incredibly awkward. But they also knew that correcting Victor in front of everyone would create its own kind of chaos. So they stayed quiet, watching, waiting to see how she would handle it. Elena set down her water cup. I don't know, she said softly. I've never really done anything like this before. Perfect, Victor said. I'm a great teacher. I'll show you the basics, and then we can do a little light sparring, just for fun. He said those last 3 words with the kind of smile that made it clear he thought this would be anything but fun for her. Elena hesitated, or at least appeared to hesitate. I'm really not sure. Oh, come on, don't be scared. I'll be gentle, I promise. She took a breath, then slowly walked toward the mat. The other employees watched, fascinated and horrified in equal measure. Maya, the engineer who had been mocked earlier, looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Elena stepped onto the mat, her bare feet making no sound on the padded surface. Victor looked her up and down, the way a cat looks at a mouse it's about to toy with. Okay, Elena, first thing, we bow to each other. It's a sign of respect. He demonstrated, bending at the waist with exaggerated formality. Elena copied the motion, her movements deliberately awkward. Good, good. Now let's see your basic stance. Elena positioned herself the way a complete beginner would, feet too close together, hands up too high, weight unevenly distributed. Victor circled her, shaking his head with theatrical disappointment. Okay, we've got some work to do here. Let me show you. For the next few minutes, he corrected her form, touching her shoulders and hips to adjust her position, always lingering a moment longer than necessary. Elena endured it, saying nothing, keeping her expression neutral. The employees watched in uncomfortable silence. A few of them pulled out their phones, pretending to check messages while actually recording. All right, Victor finally said. I think you're ready for a little sparring. Very light, okay? I'll throw a few slow attacks and you just try to block them. Easy? Elena nodded. They faced each other across the mat. Ready? Victor asked. I think so. Here we go. He launched a slow, almost insulting punch toward her shoulder, the kind of move you might use to train a child. Elena blocked it, her movement clumsy and uncertain. Victor smiled. Good. Now, try this. He threw another punch, slightly faster this time. Elena blocked again, stumbling backward. You're doing great for a complete beginner, Victor said. Loud enough for the whole room to hear. He circled her, shadowboxing the air with exaggerated movements, show-off kicks, fancy footwork, all for the benefit of the audience. The thing about sparring, he explained as he moved, is that it's really about reading your opponent, anticipating what they're going to do. Most people can't do it. They react instead of predict. That's why they lose. He stopped in front of Elena, dropping his hands to his sides in a gesture of complete confidence. Okay, last one. I'm going to come at you a little faster this time. Just try to stay on your feet. He raised his fists and stepped forward. And that's when Elena moved. To the untrained eye, what happened next was almost too fast to follow. But the employees who were watching, especially the ones who played back the video later, frame by frame, would see every detail. As Victor stepped in, Elena's entire body language changed. Her weight shifted, her center of gravity dropped. Her hands, which had been raised in a defensive posture, suddenly relaxed into a completely different position, loose, open, ready. Victor threw a quick jab toward her face. Elena's head moved a fraction of an inch, just enough for the punch to sail past her ear. At the same moment, her left hand came up and caught his wrist. Time seemed to slow down. Victor's eyes went wide as he felt his balance disappear. One moment he was standing, the next he was airborne, his own momentum used against him. Elena's hip shifted, her legs folded, and she executed a perfectly controlled throw that sent him spiraling toward the mat. He landed flat on his back with a sound like someone dropping a heavy bag of sand. The entire room gasped. Victor lay there, stunned, staring at the ceiling. His brain was still trying to process what had just happened. Elena stood over him, her posture relaxed, her expression calm. She hadn't even broken a sweat. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Was that too fast?" Victor scrambled to his feet, his face flushing red, half from embarrassment, half from anger. What the... How did you... He stopped, breathing hard, trying to regain his composure. This couldn't be happening. Some random office worker had just thrown him, a fourth-degree black belt. Lucky move, he said, forcing a laugh. You must have done some training before. Why didn't you say so? Elena tilted her head slightly. You didn't ask. The employees around the edge of the mat exchanged looks. A few of them were struggling to suppress smiles. Victor's jaw tightened. Okay, let's try that again. For real this time. Are you sure? Elena asked. I thought this was supposed to be fun. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Something ugly. His ego had been wounded, and that was dangerous. Oh, it'll be fun, he said. Trust me. He raised his fists and moved toward her, faster now. No more playing around. He threw a combination, jab, cross, hook, with real speed and genuine intent behind it. Elena flowed around every punch like water around stones. Her movements were economical, precise, the result of 20 years of training compressed into instinct. She didn't retreat. She simply wasn't where Victor's fists expected her to be. He kicked. She shifted. His legs swept through empty air. He tried a takedown. She redirected his energy, spinning him past her while barely moving her feet. He was getting frustrated now. His attacks became wilder, more aggressive, less controlled. Stand still, he growled. Why would I do that? Elena asked. She wasn't even trying to attack him. She was simply avoiding everything he threw, making him look like he was fighting a ghost. By now the gym had attracted attention. Other employees had wandered over from the weight machines and treadmills, drawn by the commotion. Someone had run to get security. Someone else had texted their department group chat. There were now close to 40 people watching. Victor, panting and red-faced, finally stopped. He bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What department are you even in?" Elena stood calmly, not breathing hard at all. "I work here," she said simply. "Same as you." "Yeah, well, whoever you are, you're clearly not being honest about your background. No beginner moves like that." "What's your rank?" Elena considered the question for a moment. "I have a black belt," she said finally. Victor straightened up, looking slightly relieved. At least he hadn't been humiliated by a complete amateur. "Which discipline?" "A few of them." "A few?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Like what?" "Judo, taekwondo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, a little boxing." The room had gone completely silent. Victor stared at her. "You're saying you have black belts in multiple martial arts?" "That's what I'm saying." "Then why didn't you just tell me that from the beginning? Why pretend to be some clueless beginner?" Elena's expression didn't change. "You never asked about my background. You took one look at me and assumed you knew everything you needed to know." She paused, letting that sink in. "You assumed I was weak because I was quiet, because I was small, because I wasn't showing off. That's not a mistake in martial arts, Victor. That's a mistake in life." A murmur went through the crowd. Several employees were nodding. Victor's face was a battlefield of emotions, anger, humiliation, confusion. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, and he definitely wasn't used to losing. "Well," he said, trying to salvage some dignity, "I appreciate the sparring session. You've clearly got skills." He turned to address the crowd, forcing a smile. "This is actually a great lesson in itself. Never underestimate your opponents. Even someone who looks like they couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag might surprise you." He laughed at his own joke. No one joined him. "I think we should end the workshop here for today," he continued. "Same time next week?" He started walking toward the edge of the mat. "One more thing." Elena's voice stopped him. He turned around slowly. "What?" Elena looked at him with those calm, brown eyes. "My last name is Reyes." Victor's brow furrowed. "Okay, and?" "Elena Reyes." The color drained from his face. Around the room, the employees who had been confused suddenly weren't. Phones appeared in hands. Whispered explanations spread like wildfire. Elena Reyes, the founder, the CEO, the woman whose name was on the building. Victor stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. He started. It's okay, Elena said, her voice neutral. You didn't know. Most people don't recognize me without the formal clothes and the entourage. She took a step toward him, not threatening, just closing the distance. But I've been watching you, Victor. I've been watching how you treat the people on this team, the way you mock them, the way you take credit for their work, the way you use your position to make them feel small, so you can feel big. Each word landed like a punch. That's not leadership. That's insecurity with a fancy title. Victor's face cycled through several shades of red and white. His mouth opened to respond, but nothing came out. I hired you because your resume looked impressive, and Thomas vouched for you. But a resume doesn't show character, and character, Victor, is what this company is built on. She turned to address the gathered employees. I want everyone here to know something. This company exists because people took chances on me when I had nothing. People believed in me when I was just a girl from a rough neighborhood with a dream. I will never forget that. Her eyes swept across the room. And I will never tolerate anyone who makes our people feel like they don't belong, like they're not good enough, like they need to perform to earn basic respect. She looked back at Victor. You have two choices. You can stay and prove that you're capable of growth, that you can learn to lead with humility instead of intimidation, or you can leave. Right now. No severance, no reference. Your choice. The room held its breath. Victor's jaw worked silently, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment it looked like he might explode, might say something angry, might try to attack, might do something that would destroy whatever was left of his career. But even he wasn't that foolish. I'll leave, he said quietly. I'll get my things. He turned and walked off the mat, pushing through the crowd, his black belt suddenly looking less like a badge of honor and more like a costume. No one moved to stop him. No one said goodbye. After Victor was gone, Elena stayed in the gym for a while. She talked to the employees who had been in the workshop. She apologized to Maya personally for what had happened earlier. You don't need to apologize, Maya said, tears in her eyes. You just did something no one else would do. You stood up for us. Standing up for people is literally my job, Elena said, and I should have done it sooner. I should have noticed how he was treating you all. You can't be everywhere, another employee said. You have a whole company to run. Elena shook her head. This company is nothing without the people who work here. If I'm not paying attention to how they're being treated, then I'm not doing my job. She looked around the gym, at the faces watching her, some confused, some awed, some still processing what they had just witnessed. I know I don't look like a CEO, she said. I know I'm not what people expect when they think of corporate leadership. And honestly, I like it that way. Because it reminds me that power isn't about appearance. It's not about titles or corner offices or fancy suits. She paused. Power is about what you do when no one's watching. How you treat people who can't do anything for you, whether you lift others up or push them down. The room was utterly silent. Master Chen, the man who taught me martial arts when I was a kid, used to tell me that the greatest victory is the one that never has to happen. The goal isn't to fight. It's to be so prepared, so grounded in who you are, that you never have to prove anything to anyone. She smiled slightly. But sometimes people force your hand. Sometimes you have to show them exactly what they're dealing with, not out of ego, not out of anger, but out of necessity, to protect the people who can't protect themselves. The video of Elena's confrontation with Victor spread through the company within hours. By the end of the week, it had leaked to social media. The internet, as it often does, had opinions. Some people called Elena a hero, a role model for women in leadership, a symbol of quiet competence over loud posturing. Others criticized her for humiliating Victor publicly instead of handling it privately through HR. There were debates about corporate culture, about martial arts, about gender dynamics in the workplace. Podcasts discussed the incident. Business magazines ran articles. Someone even made a meme. Elena didn't respond to any of it. She sent a company-wide email saying simply, "Our values are not negotiable. Treat each other with respect. That's it. That's the whole policy." Over the following months, things changed at Horizon Technologies. The HR department was given more resources to investigate complaints. New leadership training emphasized empathy and collaboration over dominance and competition. Several other managers who had been operating like Victor, just more carefully, quietly left the company when they realized the culture was shifting. And Maya, the engineer who had been mocked in the workshop, was promoted to lead a new team focused on innovative user experience design. She would go on to develop one of the most successful products in the company's history. Yes. But this story isn't really about corporate culture or viral videos or management philosophy. It's about a little girl who grew up feeling powerless, who watched her mother get pushed to the ground and vowed she would never let that happen again. It's about the years of silent work, the early morning training sessions, the late-night coding marathons, the sacrifices that no one saw. It's about choosing quiet strength over loud aggression. About letting people underestimate you, not because you're weak, but because you know exactly who you are. And it's about what happens when someone who has spent their whole life preparing finally decides to stop holding back. 6 months after the gym incident, Elena attended a martial arts exhibition in the city. She hadn't competed in years, but her old instructor, Master Chen's successor at the community center, had asked her to do a demonstration. She wore her old uniform, her old belts. She stepped onto the mat in front of hundreds of spectators and performed a kata she had first learned when she was 8 years old. When she finished, the crowd was silent for a long moment. Then they erupted into applause. Afterward, a young girl approached her. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, small, skinny, with determined eyes that reminded Elena of herself at that age. "Are you really a CEO?" the girl asked. "I am." "And you can really fight like that?" Elena knelt down to the girl's level. "I can, but you know what? The fighting is just one part of it. The most important thing is believing in yourself, believing that you're capable of anything, no matter what anyone else says." The girl considered this. "Some kids at school say girls can't do stuff like this, that we're not strong enough." Elena smiled. "I used to hear the same things. Do you want to know what I did about it?" "What?" "I stopped listening to them, and I started listening to myself. I trained harder than anyone expected. I studied more than anyone thought possible. And every time someone told me I couldn't do something, I used it as fuel to prove them wrong." She put her hand on the girl's shoulder. "You don't have to be the biggest person in the room to be the strongest. You just have to know who you are. And never let anyone convince you that you're less than what you know yourself to be." The girl nodded slowly, taking in the words. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome. Now go out there and show them what you're made of." The girl ran off to join her parents, already chattering excitedly about starting martial arts lessons. Elena watched her go, remembering her own beginning, her own journey from scared child to confident woman. Some battles are fought with fists and feet. Others are fought with patience and persistence. The hardest battles are the ones inside your own head. The voices that tell you you're not good enough, not strong enough, not worthy of respect. Elena had won all of those battles, and she would keep winning them, one day at a time. Not because she needed to prove anything to anyone, but because that little girl inside her, the one who had promised herself she would never be helpless again, deserved to see just how far she could go. Bum pum bum. Back at the office, in her modest third-floor workspace, Elena returned to her normal routine: product meetings, strategy sessions, quiet walks through the building, observing, listening, leading in her own invisible way. One day, Thomas Webb, the COO who had championed Victor, knocked on her door. "Got a minute?" he asked. Always. He sat down across from her, looking uncomfortable. I owe you an apology, he said, for bringing Victor in. For vouching for him, I should have seen what he was. Elena studied him. Why didn't you? Thomas sighed. Because he's like me. Or, like I used to be. Aggressive, competitive, willing to do whatever it takes to win. I thought that was strength. And now? Now I'm not sure I know what strength is. Elena leaned back in her chair. Strength is knowing when to push and when to yield, when to speak and when to listen, when to fight and when to walk away. Most importantly, it's having the courage to change when you realize you've been wrong. She paused. You made a mistake with Victor. The question is what you do next. Do you learn from it and become a better leader? Or do you keep making the same mistakes until they destroy you? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. I want to learn, he finally said. I want to be better. Then start by listening more than you talk. Notice the people who don't make noise but get things done. Ask questions instead of giving orders, and remember that every person in this company is a human being with their own story, their own struggles, their own dreams. She smiled slightly. It's not that different from martial arts, actually. The goal isn't to dominate, it's to harmonize, to use everyone's energy toward a common purpose. Thomas nodded slowly. I'll try. That's all anyone can do. Years passed. Horizon Technologies continued to grow. Elena continued to lead from the background, letting others take the spotlight while she focused on the work that mattered. She never forgot where she came from, never forgot the lessons she had learned in that community-centered gym, training with an old master who saw potential in a scared, angry child. And she never stopped training. 3 times a week without fail, she went to her unmarked gym and practiced the forms that had saved her, not just physically but spiritually. Because at the end of the day, martial arts wasn't about fighting. It was about becoming the best version of yourself. It was about discipline and resilience and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you're capable of. Some people need to announce their power to the world. Elena just needed to know it was there. And when the moment came, when she had to stand up for the people who couldn't stand up for themselves, she would be ready. Always ready. That's the story of the quiet CEO who took down a bully with a single throw. But really, it's a story about something much bigger. It's about the power of silence in a world that rewards noise, the power of patience in a culture that demands instant results, the power of knowing who you are, deep in your bones, regardless of what anyone else thinks. The black belt asked her to spar for fun. What happened next left him speechless, but not her. She had been waiting for that moment her entire life, and when it came, she was exactly where she needed to be, right there, on the mat, showing the world what true strength really looks like, not in the fist that strikes, but in the heart that knows when and why to use it. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed because of how you look or where you come from, remember this story. Remember Elena. Remember that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous, not because they want to hurt anyone, but because they've spent their whole lives preparing for the moment when they might have to. And remember what Master Chen taught his students. The greatest victory is the one that never has to happen. But when it does happen, when someone forces your hand, make sure it counts. Make sure they never forget it. Make sure the world sees exactly what you're made of. Because you are stronger than you know. You are more capable than you believe, and no one gets to define your limits except you. That's the real lesson. That's the real power. That's the truth that left everyone in that gym speechless that day. Not Elena's fighting skills, but her unshakable belief in herself. A belief forged in the fires of struggle, tempered by years of silent work, and ultimately impossible to ignore. The girl in the hoodie turned out to be the most powerful person in the room. She always was. She just didn't need to prove it until the moment arrived. And when that moment came, she was ready.